or it had to be absolutely from a kid's height and from a kid's eye point of view. So at that point, you're looking for a style that is not a particularly writerly style. The important thing about it is that it is the voice of somebody who is just holding your hand, looking you in the eye, and saying, "Let me tell you what happened to me," which is a fantastic kind of narrative voice to use. It's one I've used over the years. I used it in a graphic novel called Violent Cases at the beginning of my career. Used it in Mr. Punch. I've used it in a bunch of short stories. It's incredibly dangerous if done well, in that it's convincing. You really are just saying to somebody, "Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you true things. I'm just hold my hand. We're going to walk together, you and I, into a dark place, but I'm here. It's all safe. I'm holding your hand." And then you walk them into a dark place and you let go of their hand and you run away. And leaving the person just going, "Oh my gosh, I thought I trusted things. I thought I knew what was going on, and I really don't." So if somebody were imitating me, probably that particular style would be a fun one to go in and imitate. Beginning writers often don't know and can't tell if they have a story. They know that they've got an idea, but even once you've got an idea, what do you do with it? How do you build it up? How do you know if your idea has legs, if it's going to go anywhere? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you build a short story, how you build a novel, how you build a plot, how you find out if you have an idea or a notion or a concept or something that actually might be able to stand up there on its own two legs as a novel. I, especially during the Sandman years, would worry and think and obsessively ask myself questions about what is the story? What is the story? I'm making these things. They're how I feed myself. They're how I feed my family. They're how I pay the rent. What is the story? And eventually, what I decided was the story is anything fictional that keeps you turning the pages and doesn't leave you feeling cheated at the end. That was my definition. My son Ash is 3 years old, just turned 3, and his favorite game is to stand next to me on a bed or on a large sofa and go, "What's going to happen?" And then I have to go, "I don't know, what's going to happen?" And then he jumps in the air and falls down on the sofa. This can go on for weeks if you let him. He just thinks the "what's going to happen" game is the best game in the world. The "what's going to happen" game is the game that you play as a writer with your readers. What's going to happen? And that is what keeps them turning the pages. Things they don't know, things they need to find out, things they care about. And coming into a story, it can just be things like, who are these people? What are they doing? Why should I care? That's a bit odd. After a while, it can get a lot deeper. It can be, is she going to kiss her? Is she going to poison her? Does she know about the missing will? Do they know that grandmother's body is still in the room upstairs? What's going to happen? I wrote an essay once, a very small essay, in a book called Stories. And it was called Just 4 Words. It began, when somebody wrote into my blog, "Dear Neil, if you could choose a quote, either by you or another author, to be inscribed on the wall of a public library children's area, what would it be? Thanks, Lynn." I pondered for a bit. I had said a lot about books and kids reading over the years, and other people had said things pithier and wiser than I ever could. And then it hit me. And this is what I wrote. I'm not sure I'd put a quote up if it was me and I had a library wall to deface. I think I'd just remind people of the power of stories, of why they exist in the first place. I'd put up the 4 words that anyone telling a story wants to hear, the ones that show that it's working and that pages will be turned. And then what happened? The 4 words that children ask when you pause, telling them a story. The 4 words you hear at the end of a chapter. The 4 words, spoken or unspoken, that show you as a storyteller that people care. And then what happened? And those words, I think, are the most important words there are for a storyteller. So anything you can do to keep people turning the pages is legitimate. The main thing that you have to do is to care. Because if you don't care what happened, nobody else will. If you don't care about these people, nobody else will. If it doesn't matter to you what happened next, nobody else is going to give the smallest toss. So you need to care, and you need to imbue that care into your writing. Because then, anytime you stop, anytime you move from one character to another character, anytime you move from place to place, anytime you hesitate, the question is going to be, and then what happened? So, you are starting a project. You are starting from scratch. Whether it's a comic, a graphic novel, whether it's a novel, whether it's a short story, whether it's television, whether it's a movie script, you're starting something completely new. One of the best things that you can do is just sit there. I like to do it by hand if I can. I will take out a notebook and I will write down everything I know. And it's a giant brain dump. Sometimes there'll be little doodles. Words will get circled. This is not an essay for people to read. This is me telling myself right up front just everything I know. The process of writing is a really important one, because even in the process of writing anything simple, your mind starts to notice connections. And connections are what fiction is made out of. So, stories begin with ideas. And the idea can be very, very small. It can be a feeling. It can be an image. It can be something your story begins with. It could be something your story ends with. It could be some moment from the middle. It could be 2 characters interacting. Mostly you don't know an entire story, or I don't know an entire story. I will write it to find out what happens, but I have something going in. The question then is that enough to start a story with? Sometimes, if it's a beginning, I have to have a general idea of where it's going to go. If it's an end, I need to know how we got there. I've been writing long enough that I have a certain amount of faith in myself, and I think faith in yourself is something that you need, because the process of writing it's Wile E. Coyote running along a cliff and then still running. And he's fine until he stops and looks down. So as a writer, part of your job is not to stop and look down and go, there is nothing underneath me, because then you will fall. It's a process of just continuing to run toward the place, but you have to know where you're running to. Very often, something that I'm going to want to know before I begin is what it's about. And I'm probably really not going to find that out until it's over, until I sit there and reread it. And I go, what was this about? But I need to have some kind of idea of what it's about going in. And that isn't plot. If anything, I guess you could call it theme. For me, it's just, what is this about? I'm going to write Neverwhere. I have an idea of people living under London, a world under London. I have this idea of a hidden London, the idea of giving London place names literal meanings. So there really will be shepherds in Shepherd's Bush. That's an idea. What's it about? What it has to be about, and this is what I thought going into it. And it wasn't entirely what I discovered it had been about at the end, but it was what I went in with. It was just going, okay, I want this to be about the people who fall through the cracks. I want to write about homelessness. I want to write about the mentally ill. I want to write about the people who have fallen through the cracks in big cities and are living rough on the sidewalks, who are living as they can. And I want to do that in a way that anybody reading it is going to enjoy it. And they will come to it unconvinced and not necessarily know that that's what it's about. Because if I sat down and said, right, I'm writing a big book about homelessness, the only people who would pick it up and read it would be people interested in a book about homelessness. What I want to do here is write a book about living in a big city. I want to write an adventure. But I want to write an adventure which, when people finish reading that story, they're going to look at the homeless. They're going to look at the people sleeping in the shop doorways. They're going to look at these people and they aren't going to pretend they're invisible. And that for me suddenly crystallized the metaphor. I mean, for me, so much fantasy is about making a metaphor concrete. What it's about for me is the way that we treat the homeless.